Well, I've been a lifelong home gardener, and when I moved to Silver City, there were a couple things that I noticed. One is that we are geographically isolated. We're not on any major interstate highways, and the roads that come into Silver don't go anywhere else. So if you come to Silver, you're coming here. You're not going, not on your way to somewhere else. And one of the issues with that is we're very dependent on outside food sources. So the first thing I was questioning is why don't we grow more of our own food locally? And the simple answer is that it's very difficult. We live in a semi-arid climate. The soils here are mostly volcanic, very high in pH and low in organic matter. So it's just very challenging to grow anything here in the native soils. So you have to find ways to amend the soils with organic materials and introduce um, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are the components of most fertilizers. So that was one of the reasons why I got interested in food waste, because food waste is typically very moist. There's a lot of moisture already in the food. So mixing that into a compost pile that traditionally would have, leaves and twigs and other garden waste is a way to introduce that moisture back into the composting system without having to add water, which is also a scarce resource here in Silver City. Well, I think the simple thing is we can take our food waste and use it to grow more food. It's really the epitome of a circular system where we can either compost the food using microorganisms, or we can even use vermiculture, which is the use of earthworms to let them eat the food and turn it into nutritious, enriched materials that we can add into our soils. And then when we add these materials back into our gardens, we can grow more food with it. So you can't get better than a circular system like that, where our waste becomes enrichment for new food growth, which is something that we really need to do in Silver City because of all the other challenges like we've discussed. Essentially, vermiculture is just taking earthworms and giving them an environment that they're used to growing in, which is uh, subsoil but not deep. Most of the types of earthworms that are used in vermiculture um, live in leaf litter and just below just out of sight. So we take our food waste and put them in either containers or in piles where the earthworms can get up into and eat the food. And then what we call the worm castings then are very enriched in nutrients. And they've essentially digested all this food and turned it into this highly enriched compost that we can then put back in our gardens. And it has many benefits besides just the chemicals that are in it, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but also they're highly enriched in the microorganisms that then again grow in the soil and benefit the plants. It's interesting. I have had some experience showing kids vermiculture bins, and that is the first reaction usually is like, oh, they're all, you know, squirmy and slimy and stuff. But there's also a fascination because, worms are alive and kids are always interested in animals um, and bugs and insects. And so I think the squeamish aspect goes away fairly quickly when they start getting interested, like, well, why are you doing this and how does this work? And
Mhm.
um, just the fact that you have this whole culture of animals living in a tub that are eating what we would be throwing away in our garbage,
Mhm.
and then they produce this black soil that's it's pretty amazing to see how quickly they break down food waste too. It can be a matter of days or weeks. And then you have this stuff that you can just shovel into your garden and mix into the soil right away
Mhm.
and plant seeds in, and you can see the growth is much greater. And there's just all these positive feedbacks that you can see fairly quickly from it. I think the two main aspects, one is just teaching kids where our food comes from. Sometimes we're so detached when we go to the grocery store, even if you buy like strawberries or something, but you don't see the plant the strawberries grew on, and you don't know the environment that they grew in. They're in a plastic container. So even though kids like strawberries, if you show them how a strawberry plant grows, it gives them more of a connection, not only to their food, but just to nature itself, and show and demonstrate how the natural world is necessary to produce the foods that we eat. And then when you can show them, you can take that a step further, and all the food waste and the things that we don't eat can be turned back into materials that we can put back in the garden to grow more food. I think this light bulb just goes off in their head and they're like, oh, that's how it works.
Mhm.
Because kids are curious. They want to know how things work and how the world works and how nature provides. And I think it's just a hands on lesson that is so immediate when you start showing kids how things grow in the garden, particularly if they can go down and pick a strawberry and pop it right in their mouth. You
Mhm.
can't get more immediate than that. I think if we could really encourage local agriculture where we're growing food here, we're selling it here, we're eating it here, and then we're taking all of that, any waste out of that process and putting it back into those efforts to grow more food. And then in addition, like I said, repairing the environment, growing more trees.
Mhm.
Um, we can turn some of these negative feedback cycles into positive feedback cycles because more trees provide more shade. That reduces the heat load on the soils, which reduces the evaporation of the scarce amount of water that we have. So
Mhm.
you can start seeing how these positive feedback cycles can then improve the local climate, which would reduce some of the stresses that we're experiencing from things like these uh, local and more regional drought
Mhm.
and the other effects of climate change that are, like we've discussed, making it more challenging to do these things.